So how do you actually run jobs on Hoffman? So you have this script. We're just going to do an example script here. And it's called alignreads.sh. It's a shell script. And you don't have to worry too much about what it does. I mean, you have the hashbang at the top that just says this is a bash script. And then it runs this command here, bwa-mem. Bwa is the command, very popular function for aligning DNA sequencing reads. And then mem is just the algorithm it's going to be using. And then we have these files here that are stored in Scratch that it's going to be acting on and writing to. So the first thing is that, is BWA even available? It is on Hoffman. Hoffman has many programs installed, but they're not readily available to be called. And this is because they have multiple versions installed. You might want to use a very specific version for your research. Your lab has a specific version they like. So Hoffman has multiple versions installed. And to load a very specific module in your script, you need to add these two lines. The first line is sourcing a file that just makes sure that the modules are loaded correctly. And then the command here, module load, is the way you instantiate a program that you want to use. And here I'm calling BWA version 0.7.7. And Hoffman has many versions of BWA, and if you want to see which versions they have of a program that you're interested in, you run this command module avail, and then like the first few letters of whatever you're looking for, and it'll show you which versions they have. If it's not installed, you can submit a ticket to see if they can install it for you, or you can install it yourself to your home directory. I won't discuss that here, but in general, you just want to do user installations. So you set the prefix to where something is installed. So how do you actually get this script running on Hoffman? So it uses, you need to submit this to the job scheduler. So how you submit this, the first thing you need to know is how much memory and how much time that the job needs. This is kind of an art that I will discuss later in the presentation on how you figure these things out. But let's just assume that I know that this script that I wrote takes 16 gigs of RAM and will finish within 24 hours. The command to submit jobs to Hoffman, and this is what you run from the login node, is this qsub command. And the basic options that you need for this are this -n here, and this is the name of the job. This is just so you can keep track of it. You have a name for it, and then the resources you indicate with the -l option. And here you need to indicate how much memory the job will use and how much runtime the job will use. And then you finish it with the script that you want it to submit. And then when you submit a job, you get a numeric job ID. This is anywhere from 1 digit to, I've seen it go to 9 digits, but it gets reset every time they update the scheduler. And this will be important for some of the other options I'll discuss for qsub. If you need a job that needs longer than 24 hours or a lot of memory, like 128 gigs of RAM, you won't be able to get that with this command. It won't tell you that though. You'll submit your job and it'll just never run. To actually get those to run, you need high-P access, which is indicated in the bottom right in red. And you add that to the -l option. And not everyone actually has this high-P access. It depends on which lab you're in. For example, if you're part of the Eskin group, you have access to high-P. So there's a lot of options for qsub. I just showed you the basic ones, but just so you're aware of what you can do with qsub, I wanted to go through some of the more useful options. There's much more than this, but I just thought these were the useful ones. At the top, you have CWD. This sets the working directory. So if you want to use relative paths in your scripts, you should avoid that. But if you do want to do that, you add this option to qsub. There's this -v, capital V, that exports all your environmental variables. So if you have a lot of variables in your bash session, you can export those to the job environment. They won't readily be available unless you indicate this -v option. And then -o and -e are ways to indicate where you want the logs to be written. -o tells you where the regular logs will be written. So like if you're doing bash like echo or Python for print, everything you write through there will show up in the path that you put in -o. By default, it'll just show up in the same directory that you submitted the job from. And it'll have the name of the job, .o, and then the job ID number. And -e is for all the error output. So if any part of the program writes a standard error, you'll find it in where this path points to. And then the -J option, I use this a lot, but you might not want to. It merges the -O and -E so that standard output and standard error go to one file. It keeps things a little bit cleaner so you don't get too many files. And then the reason why I mentioned that each job gets a job ID, you can use this to make pipelines. And the way you run jobs sequentially, where one waits for the other to run, you use this hold JID option, and then you give it a job ID. And what this tells QSub is that wait for that job that you just specified to finish before running this one. And this is really useful if you have a multi-step analysis pipeline. And then this is really cool. The -M option is if you want to get emailed when something happens with your job. So there's more than this, but the basic ones are you can put B, which will email you when your job starts, E when your job ends, A when your job exits because of an error, and then N for don't email. By default, it won't email you if you don't put this option. And then -Q, the scheduler, the way it works is when you submit a job, there's different queues that it will run on because the nodes are assigned to different groups. You can submit to specific nodes. And this is useful if you have, if you're in many groups that have different nodes and you want to be just using one of those groups nodes. And then I won't discuss this, but if you want to do parallel computing, you'll see this -PE option. Just be aware that that's available if you want to do multi-threading, multi-processing, or computation over multiple nodes. You can do this through the PE option. And then what I'll be talking about next is this -T option. This lets you submit a job array. So the purpose of this is if you have a job that you want to run over many files, it's the same job, but you want to run it many times. You have a limit on how many jobs you can submit, but if you want to submit, say, like 3,000 of one job doing it to 3,000 different files, you can use an array job and it'll only count as one job. And this is a nice way to get things done efficiently if you want to, yeah.
So when you use the out and the error
Yeah.
options, do you give it a file or a folder? Like
So the question was for -O and -E, what the parameter actually is. It can be a directory or a folder, or a file. If it's a file, it'll actually write to that file. If it's a directory, it'll create a file in that directory with the standard naming convention. So I want to talk about job arrays next, because very likely if you'll run into this and it'll make your life a lot easier. So at the top you have a QSub command where I added the -T option, and the way the syntax works is you do -T and then your start index, dash your end index, and then the step size. So here I did 1 through 3 and then a step size of 1. So I want jobs for indexes 1, 2, and 3. And what this does is when I submit this job, I get this new variable here that's available in my script called SGE task ID, and this will be 1, 2, or 3. And a simple way to use this is just say, hey, this is my index, and I have files that are just named as I did before, but with this index as a suffix. And I can just run the script, and every file, ALN 1 through 3, will be generated when I just submit this one script. Another way there's many ways you can utilize the SGE task ID. You'll see people using it dozens of different ways, but this is one way. And then, some quick things to avoid. Don't do an array for short jobs. Hoffman's official policy is that if you submit 200 jobs that are less than 3 minutes, you get throttled, which means they prevent you from submitting any jobs for 2 hours, which can be a bummer. And then also avoid using the email option with this. I have had someone send me an array job that submitted 10,000 and had an email option on, so I received 10,000 emails. That wasn't very pleasant. So another quick way you could use SGE task ID is if you have more complicated parameters that you want to assign to over many jobs. I make a parameter file, so each line has parameters for a job that I want to run. And then you can actually pull a very specific line from a file using this sed command. So I just use the SGE task ID to get an index and then pull that line number, and then use that as parameters for my command. This is another way to use array jobs. So another convenience thing is you can make job files instead of doing this long QSub command. All these options that we have here, the -N, the -L, we can actually move to our job file. So I have this new file here called alignreads.job. The extension is not too important, but I just like to put that so I know what it is. You can just move these options to the top of this file with this $sign, and then put the options here. And then you have this, and then I run the original script here. And then you can just qsub this job file. You don't need to have that long command option. And then interactive sessions is very useful. So everything I showed you is you submit it to the queue and you forget about it, it'll run, and then your results will be present. But if you want to actually interact with a node and do your computation on the command line directly, you use interactive sessions. And the way you access this is through this command qrsh. And it takes this option-L, which is similar to the qsub option-L, and you just indicate how much time and memory you will want to use. And again, the limit for shared interactive sessions is 24 hours. And then once you press enter, it'll just sit there until like a node is available, but you'll know you're in when your prompt changes from your user at the login node to user at the very specific node, like N2002. So interactive sessions, you can use it for a lot of things, but personally, I like to use it for testing a script before I submit it through qsub, just to see that it runs. I don't want to get throttled on accident or something like that. And it's also nice to just get a lot of like high intensive work done if you're just like writing bash or something.